Elephant Ramen by Gary Ives, read by Gary Ives. Deputy United Nations Secretary General Willem de Vries would chair the emergency meeting. This was because Secretary General Chou Fan-Hua remained hospitalized in Beijing, victim of a heart attack. Present were the directors of the Economic and Social Council, the World Health Organization, and the entire Security Council. Willem de Vries spoke quietly with Colonel Vanderhoff, ordering the Chief of Security to ensure all recording devices were secured and to clear the translation studio of all personnel, save the guards he and de Vries had handpicked. The meeting would be held in complete secrecy, in English, and with no notes taken. Once guards were positioned at each door and de Vries received a hand signal from Colonel Vanderhoff in the translation studio above, he began the meeting. Gentlemen, ladies, allow me to begin, and I must insist no notes or recordings of this meeting. Your cell phones and electronics will be returned as you leave the meeting. I apologize, but you'll soon understand the necessity for this inconvenience. First, Secretary General Chou Fan-Hua is dead. I've received this information only minutes ago. Murmurs and chatter filled the air until de Vries called the group to order. This is most unfortunate and complicates the emergency we are already facing. What's done is done, and I'm sorry to report that we must needs continue forward. Each member realized that the United Nations under Willem de Vries' leadership would be a much different one than that of kindly old Chou Fan-Hua, a moderate. No, de Vries was known as the Flying Dutchman, and to some as the Firing Dutchman, for his reputation as a tough pragmatist. His motto was on board or overboard. Now this meeting. What bomb awaited? The famine, now in its 9th year, had been an unforeseen outcome of the jihadist war of 2012. Reacting to the Israeli airstrike on Iranian military installations, an attempt to disarm Iran's nuclear weapons potential, Iran, using North Korean Silkworm missiles, had destroyed Haifa and Tel Aviv with a 5-megaton hydrogen airburst 2,000 meters above each city. Jerusalem, the city, remained intact, however, its entire population victim of the 7 cesium cobalt bombs that had been prepositioned behind its missile shield by suicide Sons of God saboteurs. Simultaneously, Iraqi military positions near the Iranian border were attacked with tactical nuclear weapons. They issued 24 ultimatums to the heads of state of Iraq, Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Yemen, Oman, Qatar, Bahrain, Dubai, and the Sudan, all of which instantly capitulated. Air Force One had carried President Obama directly to Brussels, where NATO considered its options. The President assured NATO members that the United States would not act unilaterally, despite the advice of his Joint Chiefs of Staff. German, British, and Dutch admirals and generals argued for the total annihilation of Iran. Television broadcasts from Tehran, Pyongyang, and Islamabad championed the victory and warned the West that any military response would be met by immediate destruction of major European and American cities by prepositioned cesium and cobalt bombs. The United States was to begin immediate withdrawal of all land and naval forces from the Arabian Peninsula, Iraq, and Afghanistan, or face dire consequences. Any nation failing to submit to Iran's orders would risk attack. As the first of these televised warnings was broadcast, France became the first nation to withdraw from NATO, then Turkey. That fault line increased in magnitude as hundreds of thousands of Europeans and Americans took to the streets, demanding an end to NATO and peace with the Islamists at any price. President Obama urged his people to remain calm as he issued orders throughout the Joint Chiefs of Staff to stand down. He promised to address a joint session of Congress and the American people the next day when he returned to Washington. Would the United States unleash the dogs of war? The world trembled. That night, as Air Force One crossed the Atlantic, the communications officer passed the following flash message to Obama. Carrier USS Ronald Reagan attacked near the Straits of Hormuz. Heavy casualties, at least 6 torpedo hits. Ship listing heavily to starboard. Extremely high radiation levels detected. Rescue operations compounded by heavy seas and interference from Pakistani naval units. At the Capitol the next day, the President delivered before both houses of Congress a short conciliatory speech, disdaining the dreadful attacks by Iran, but emphasizing the overreaching need to preserve peace. He asked that all nations in the Persian Gulf assist in rescue operations for our sinking aircraft carrier. More than 100 members of the House and 23 senators turned their backs on the President and left the chamber. Tens of thousands of Americans took to the streets calling for war. The Joint Chiefs of Staff met in emergency session that morning, agreeing to ignore the President's stand-down orders. That afternoon, Tehran, Islamabad, and Pyongyang were reduced to glass. By the week's end, 17 nuclear explosions had occurred throughout principal European and American cities. The President and many government officials dead among the ashes of Washington, D.C. The Third World War lasted but 5 days. Then followed what became known as the Long Sickness. Hundreds of millions suffered radiation sickness, and tens of millions died within 2 weeks. Though New York had been spared, American government and military organizations had collapsed with the annihilation of Washington, D.C. The United Nations assumed guidance of the wounded planet. Surviving military, scientific, and industrial assets were ceded to the world body by every nation. The immediate emergencies have been medical, treatment of the injured, and reestablishment of systems of hygiene and food distribution. Predictably, famine and disease followed the nuclear catastrophes. Failures in grain crops ensued with a wheat rust impervious to chemicals or genetic tinkering. Then, a fungal seedling rot hit the rice paddies of Asia, Africa, and South America. Scientists theorized that the now ubiquitous radioactivity had upset not only the animal kingdom's immune systems, but those of the plant world too. The UN Security Council has established 3 super laboratories in Beijing, Brasilia, and Mumbai to discover solutions to the food crisis, concomitant social problems, and scientific progress. DeFries continued. No doubt each of you is wondering why our electronics have been confiscated. It is paramount that the plans revealed today be initiated quickly, efficiently, completely, and under exacting secrecy. Any breach of security by anyone, and that includes each of you, any breach concerning any aspect of Operation Regenesis will incur the penalty of summary execution. Do I make myself clear? There will be time for questions after I explain Operation Regenesis. Last December, our super lab in Beijing concluded the food harvest potential assessments for the next 2 decades, and to be short and to the point, as the Americans say, world population now stands at 4.5 billion. The planet is producing sufficient food for 4.3 billion. However, harvests in the face of the potato blight, wheat rust, and the seedling rot will continue to rapidly decrease. And I must add, the Beijing laboratory did not factor in the new 88% human allergenic reaction to maize. As early as next year, ladies and gentlemen, food production will shortfall to only enough food to feed 3.2 billion people. The scale of starvation we're seeing now in Africa will be commonplace on every continent. In 3 years' time, the prediction is food production for 2.9 billion. Superlab Brasilia sees no remedies for the plant diseases within the next 12 to 16 years. De Vries paused here, allowing the assembled leaders a few minutes to grasp the enormity of the situation. Under the pall of desolation his message had wrought, these men and women, the leaders of the world, cringed. Individually, some thought of ways to ensure hoarding enough food for their own families, while others thought selflessly and searched for schemes to protect their country's food resources. Your attention, please. There is, gentlemen, ladies, there is a hope. A bright ray of hope from Superlab Mumbai. Now a short Indian man from the laboratory entered. Here may I present Dr. Vijay Krothapalli from the Mumbai Superlab, who will introduce to you Operation Regenesis. Good morning, all. As you know, Superlab Mumbai's function is exploration and initiation of genetics in the animal kingdom. Division 1 of the lab concerns human disease, Division 2, diseases of the animal kingdom. Still another, Division 3, has supervision of genetic improvement for food sources. We have modified the genetics of turkeys, chickens, pigeons, guinea pigs, swine, and over 100 varieties of fish, increasing food production exponentially. When Superlab Beijing's data was confirmed, we established the Human Eugenics Department within this lab. Working with Brasilia and Beijing, we have developed and have already begun implementation of Operation Regenesis. Dr. Krothapalli reached into his jacket pocket and produced a packet of elephant ramen, bright orange, with a picture of the elephant. I'm sure the gentlemen and ladies are all familiar with this. Indeed they were. It was the many, many tons of ramen distributed by the UN that had forestalled the famine in Asia, Europe, and North America. Elephant ramen had in large part replaced the shortfalls of grain precipitated by diseases. Each small packet was charged with a balance of fats, carbohydrates, proteins, vitamins, and minerals. One could survive on elephant ramen alone if necessary. The noodles could be boiled, fried, or eaten from the pack, and had become the most commonplace food on planet Earth. For the past 2 years, we have distributed billions of tons of elephant ramen the world over. Let me ask you, ladies and gentlemen, are there any of you present who has not eaten elephant ramen? A chuckle arose from the group. Yes, every single person had eaten elephant ramen, and plenty of it. After all, in its plainest form, it was free, distributed by the World Health Organization all over the planet. Fancy flavor-enhanced versions of elephant ramen were available from the food stalls where millions of workers caught with their quick lunches. Dr. Krothapalli smiled at Deputy Secretary General de Vries, who had cautioned him not to tell every secret concerning elephant ramen. Elephant ramen was not Soylent Green, as rumored, processed human corpses, no. But it was processed human and animal feces, a fact the world did not need to know. 4 years ago, Mumbai lab developed the elephant ramen formulas. Beijing lab was tasked with initiating production and distribution, and the miracle became a reality, as we all know. Within the past 2 years, everyone eats elephant ramen. Deputy Secretary General de Vries has asked me to reveal some of the secret aspects of elephant ramen. Shall I proceed, Your Excellency? Yes, by all means, Dr. Krothapalli. Very well then. First, the bad news. 5% of all shipments of elephant ramen that will be delivered January through July will randomly include a lethal component that will cause a painless death within 24 hours, a death that masks a heart attack. Before the fall harvest in the southern hemisphere, world population will decrease between 25 and 30%. The immediate reduction in the demand for food is imperative. Without this drastic action, food riots and social unrest will occur, and the world could be plunged again into the horrible pre-Israel Islamic jihadist wars. Gentlemen and ladies, I am sorry, truly sorry. Now, Deputy Secretary General de Vries promised a ray of hope. Here it is. Effective immediately, every packet of elephant ramen will perforce include 25 milligrams of TNY1, an enzyme which attaches to the human growth hormone. This enzyme is a product of refinement of a gene extracted from African pygmies. Each generation from now on will produce smaller and smaller offspring. Within only 2 generations, that's 40 years, the average human will grow to only 3 feet tall and weigh no more than 60 pounds, requiring less than 500 calories daily. Gentlemen, ladies, I give you Operation Regenesis.